All right, Shabbat Shalom. We are live at Divine Vine for our Torah Recap. Hey, let's see, that needs to get off of there. There we go. So Shabbat Shalom there, Amelia, Robert, and Marcia. Whoever else is online right now, Shabbat Shalom to you. Today we'll be in the Torah Recap. Our Torah portion today will be number 16 through 1832. Korah. Yeah. And it will be late, and after that we'll be in Samuel chapter 14. Then we'll be heading over to 1 Peter chapter 3. So, Trace. So anyway, Jonathan, go ahead and do us honors.
Honors all mine. Joe, thank you for this day. Thank you for your Sabbath. Thank you so much for the command and the instruction. It gives us a predetermined day off each week that we are already ready for it, we're prepared for it, and we're looking forward to it. I thank you for the scriptures, that we get a chance to sit down, study, read, relax, and spend time with the fellow believers, Lord. I know this is the time that you have us appointed to be together, to congregate, and to build up and edify each other. Through the lens of your scripture and through the purpose of living a godly life that's worthy of being called children like your son. So I thank you for this day, for your Sabbath, and all that you're going to be doing in our lives. Praise in your son's holy name, Yeshua. Amen.
Amen. Hey there, country dad, a.k.a. Matt, Miss Cleveland, and Debbie Avery. Shalom, shalom. So we get me a paper towel, Vicky, please.
Up here. So yeah, we're like Joe said, we're gonna be starting in Numbers chapter 16. But I wanted to super quick recap on the recap of last week's.
Sounds like Gerald's tires over here.
Exactly. Only people around here would know that, though.
That's true.
It's talking about the tassels and on the garments. So right before we get to Korah and his rebellion and all that juicy stuff, the thing that led up to this point was, hey, don't forget about my commands. Keep them near and dear to you. Look upon them and remember them daily. And I know we had a long discussion on what and why and how we wear tassels and if and when we're supposed to, and is it still commanded? But yet that happens right before this rebellion. So, it's a reminder to remember about, being in the right place at the right time and doing what God has planned for you. So when we look at Korah is the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, son of Levi. So, when we look at the priesthood, I know somebody had put out a nice little chart and showed like all the sons and where their lineage ended and how we feel.
I'll actually be showing that today during my service.
Oh, well,
yes.
Okay. Well,
it's a copy of a copy, so it ain't clear. I ripped it good, man.
But the nice thing about that is you guys have the plugs to be in on the sermon later. So we can get a better look at that. So I'll skip that for now.
Yeah.
And
no, you can go on that.
No,
please.
But yeah, it says that they assembled themselves together. Oh, you're like, oh, good thing against Moses, bad thing, right? So that sentence went from good to bad pretty quick. And then Moses says, "You have gone too far. For all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" So this wasn't so much against Moses. God in this situation seems to have taken it personal. Like, oh, if you're going against my man, you're going against me. Because everything he's telling you is what I told you. So you're saying you don't like what I'm telling you to do. You don't like what I'm asking you to do. Moses is just the person that you're looking at. He's the figurehead, per se. And I'm not going to say Yeshua's in the same boat, but God's like, these were my words. I sent my son to tell you my words. So if you reject him, you are rejecting me directly to my face. I'm taking that personally. So Moses is like a first early iteration of that. And I think that's why Yeshua harkens back to Moses so often, because he was the man in place of the God to the people. So yeah, even Moses is like, whoa. You've exalted yourselves above the assembly of the Lord. So you're just like, you're putting yourself above all of this. Right. Not just above the other tribes, not just above me, above everything.
And Shabbat Shalom there. See Miss Karen's on there. Anybody else I may have missed? Shalom to you. So yeah, starting off in chapter 16, not a good look whatsoever. Not a good look at all. The one thing in here that, again, I agree with you that this isn't, you are coming against Moshe, but you're actually coming against what God put in place of leadership This is whom I speak through. This is, God himself said, this is the only man I've ever spoke to face. He says, all the other prophets, dreams, visions, all this other stuff. He's like, it's literally when you hear him speak, you're hearing me speak. Mm-hmm. So what they're not getting at, like right here in 3, it says, and they assembled against Moshe and against Aaron and said to them, enough of you. It's like, wow. It says, for all the congregation is set apart, all of them, and Jehovah is in their midst. So now they're speaking on God's behalf. It says, why then do you lift up yourselves above the assembly of Yahweh? When Moshe heard this, he fell on his face. And so I think part of that is Moshe's like, there's a humbleness there. There's a, man, this ain't going to be good here in just a minute. And probably there's a lot of things going on with this. But, with Korah, for them to come against the authority here, it's like, we're going to go through the story a little bit here. We're going to find out what happens with them. But this is an example of that we need to take with us all the days of our lives. Mm-hmm. When God has set something in authority or in a position of authority, don't come against it. Do not come against it. I know there's a lot of people out there who claim that they're whatever, and they'll tell you, like, some of the mainstream pastors out there tell you, well, if you come against our ministry, I place a curse upon you and all this stuff. But I will say this, those who are truly set there by our Heavenly Father, you will know. And you will know if you come against that, because I believe God will give a rebuke back to you.
One of the other points that stood out to me was in verse 8, it says, and Moses said to Korah, so now they're having this personal conversation, mm-hmm. Hear now, you sons of Levi. So he's letting them know, hey, you're still a son of Levi. You're in this position for a reason. You've been ordained to be a part of the priesthood. Hear now, O sons of Levi, is it too small a thing for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord and stand before the congregation and minister to them? So he's giving them their job title. He's like, hey, is it not a small thing that you were separated out? You are already, quote unquote, chosen. You are already and then there's no people that are better than any other people, but you're in a category that not a lot of people get to be a part of. You're already in a special category, equal, but it's your role is very special. Is it no small thing? Like, have you lost sight of like what we're actually doing here and what the purpose is? It's not about being lifted up. It's not about being important. It's about ministering, right? And that word minister, Andrew, one of our men in the group, it's good to explain that it doesn't mean to be a preacher or to preach the word. It means to work toward or to serve. And he's like, your job was to serve the people. Like, this is a special calling. Not everybody gets this. He's like, why are you in my face about this? Like, why are you trying to supplant me when your job is to be a servant? And mm-hmm. I'm not trying to make a big deal of it, but you guys are making this a problem. Like, this shouldn't be an issue, but yet they've caused it to be an issue. And he's like, he's letting him know this isn't by my authority. God separated. So he's appealing to the highest authority here, trying to call them back. Hey, God did this, man. What are you guys still fighting me over?
Absolutely. And I like the fact that Moshe, just going up a verse above that from 8, he puts the same words back on Korah. He says, in the very end there, he says, enough of you. Mm-hmm. Enough of me? Really? He says, enough of you, sons of Levi. What you got, Nick?
I got
no neck, Nick.
Hold on. Too much of a distraction.
Yeah, get rid of the popcorn.
Show that people are always power. They coveted that top priesthood. And that's, tale as old as time.
Go ahead, Carmen. That's it? Okay. No, I agree with you on that one. Shabbat shalom there, Didi. I see you there.
So I was going to jump down. I was going to do 2 different verses, 16 and 20. So 16 says, be present, you and all your company before the Lord, and they and Aaron tomorrow. So he's kind of giving them the drawing the line in the sand, as we would say. Oh yeah, you guys go ahead and be here. Set yourself up, be ready to go. And then verse 20 it says, and then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. So this one was interesting because normally you just hear the Lord spoke to Moses, and then Moses has to go tell Aaron. But here Aaron's kind of getting to hear or be a part of the conversation a little bit. So I thought that was, it kind of shows you
Right.
how important this is. Separate yourselves from among the congregation that I may consume them in a moment. He's like, hey, since you guys are the ones who are actually listening and do what I'm asking you, why don't you go ahead and take a break, pull back a little bit. I'm going to handle this, because I think from God's perspective is there's government stuff, there's civil stuff, and then I'm not going to allow this stuff. And you can see where like certain items, like when David and Goliath, David could have went in there with a paper airplane. Goliath was out of there because he's like, oh, you're going to mock my people and my God?
Right.
No. And so, I don't think it was that David was just some super sniper with a rock. I think that God was like, oh, I'm handling this regardless of what you bring to the table because I will not be mocked. Right. And here Korah's like, oh, we're the best. We can do this. Moses, get out of here. We're going to supersede that. God's like, not on my watch.
Right.
And I think that's why he's like, hey, take a step back and watch. And I think Moses had this moment where he knows he just got done dealing with the 10 plagues in Egypt. And God pretty much said, put the staff down, stand back and watch. Go here, stand back and watch. Call down hail, stand back and watch. So he's like, when God says, hey, stand back and watch, Moses was like, yeah, no problem. Whew, whatever you're doing is God level events. I don't got nothing on that. Korah, I warned you.
Yeah.
You angered God. That's not where you want to be.
Yeah, so basically what we have here is we have a family what's that word for? Quarrel going on.
Korah.
Yeah, quarrel. There you go.
You got it.
But the thing is like again, we get this we're getting this grumbling coming in here when we go back just a little bit because it says because part of their reasoning for wanting to usurp him and take him out of leadership and out of power was, well, we didn't get to go into the land. Well, I kind of wish Moshe would have been written here. Well, dummy, that was y'all's fault.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't my fault.
Right.
I pleaded with you. I tore my garments. We were all pleading with you. As of today, choose life or death, but please choose life. You've seen the hand of God. You've been tested now 10 times. You failed the test. To me, what I think some of this is a frustration that the people are having. And usually with that frustration, you're going to take it to the leadership. Mm. You're going to take it to the top. And at this point, I think what's happening here is a really bad lack of judgment. It's a condition of the heart, which is wicked. And so basically what you're saying is all these things, what Korah needed to say to himself was, we messed up. Mm. And so, but we messed up because it's your fault.
Right.
And so they're trying to put that blame on him. And so in doing so, they're like, now, guess what we're going to do? We're going to move you out the way and we're going to take over. And God's like, not on my watch. So it's when you go back into the grumbling part, and this always seems to be that part where I think where God gets under God's skin, so to speak. I don't know what kind of skin he's got, but he seems good underneath there. Because it says in 13, is it little that you have brought us? Is it little that you have brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you would also seize total rule over us? Also, you have not brought us into the land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Would you bore out the eyes of these men? We are not coming up. So they were requested to come up, before the assembly there, and they were like, no, we're not going to do it. No. So we're going to have a little thing. So then Moshe speaks to the Abba. He takes it back to Abba. Moshe in verse 14 says, became very displeased and said to Jehovah, do not respect their offering. There's something to be said about that. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I done harm to any of them. And of course, then we go into the thing where it says, and Moshe said to Korah, tomorrow you and all your company shall be there before Jehovah, you and they and Aaron. And of course, we know that basically what's going to happen next. So you guys take it from there. Nicholas, anything?
No, I'm going to be quiet.
You're going to be quiet.
What's up, Vicky?
Loud and proud.
What stood out to me later down in the chapter, from verse 28 to 31, where it says, and Moses said,
Hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and that it has not been of my own accord. If these men die as all men die, or if they are visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their household and all the people who belonged to Torah and all their goods. So it's like God took care of it, and it was judged automatically. Kind of not the same, but it reminded me of in the book of Job when all the messengers was delivering the messages to Job. It's like before he could process, like one calamity, another one was coming. And here in this whole chapter, the people are warned, and like y'all said, they're still doing their own thing. And so after he said what he had to say to the people, as soon as he got done, God took care of business right then.
Yeah, I went on a dive with this on Telegram. I don't know if y'all saw that. Well, that verse right there, she read about all the men who belong, like slaughtered all the men who belong to Korah, and I started thinking, well, does that mean all of them died? But then Korah people wrote some of the songs. It can't be that way. So I started looking into some other things, and it brought me back to verse 27 when it said David and Abraham came out and stood in the doorway with their tents along with their wives and their sons. So all of them were taken. I thought, well, that's interesting.
Mm.
It's interesting that they were all, but Korah's kids and wives were still safe. To go on to write songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if it was one of those majority men, because they were the leaders and they were the ones that were kind of pushing it for the families. And so, God's never about removing people needlessly. It's very much what needs to happen has to happen. Otherwise, nothing more, nothing less. There's no senseless removal of people.
Maybe she took it seriously, and when they said get away from them, and she hightailed it out of there.
Yeah. Well, and then we see in 36, it talks about, the Lord spoke to Moses again, tell Eleazar. So God's like, I'm telling you whose camp I'm in. I'm back in Eleazar and that lineage, just in case there's any more confusion. But yet, and I don't, you can feel free to go back if we need to. But 41, it says, but the next day, all the congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses. So before it was Korah and his people. Now it's all the congregation, and what they're saying is, you have killed the people of the Lord. They're like, well, how are you going to kill priest people? How are you going to kill the good guys? Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to stand in front of a quote unquote angry God if they're killing the priest? Well, we've got no chance. And he's like, no. There's a whole difference. I'm judging at the heart level. These guys were going against me, and they were preaching and speaking against his anointed. So you do what you're supposed to do, and you're fine. But the people are like, well, I can see their mentality of, well, you killed the priest. That's like coming to church and like, oh, God took out the pastor. You're like, oh, then I guess we don't need to be here anymore. He's like, no, you missed the point. You still are supposed to serve God. And it was their choices that led them to the result that they received, not because God didn't love them anymore, because they were being usurped or anything like that.
I agree with you. It's a complete heart issue. So whenever you look at Yeshua and he tells his disciples, listen to what they have to say, but do not act how they act and stuff like that. It's the same thing. Korah's heart, despite the fact that they were from the tribe of Levi and were the priests, obviously had no duck in that hunt or dog in that hunt, however the saying goes. He was obviously just doing it because it was a tradition. It was something that he was taught to do, but he had no relationship with Yahweh. Because if he did, he would understand that Moses had been appointed by Yah. So they're going through all of these different things with being the priests, but Korah is not actually, his head's not in the game. He's not actually doing it because he's in reverence of God. He's doing it because it was a titled thing to him from generations.
Right.
So
One more thing, like
Yeah. No.
you almost gotta say poor Moses, because you see, like leadership can be a lonely thing
Mhm.
where you have decisions you got to make that people don't understand, and they're going to get you from. And look at him, and he's taking it from the Lord and just going with it. And people are always going to grumble, aren't they? I know you know that.
Yep. And here's the thing going along with that is the fact that, after all this is done, you got these guys apparently who are also bringing they're bringing incense before the Father who aren't qualified to do so, because it says it later in the Word. And it says, where was it in here? It says, it says in verse 35, and the fire came out from Jehovah and consumed 250 men who were offering incense. These 250 men were not supposed to be, that was not their job to do that. So again, we have continue usurping of God's authority of what God's put into place of the tabernacle. Then when you go further down from there, so the Father saying, hey, you need to take all these censers that had all this in there. You're going to take a hammer to them. You're going to place them upon the altar, all this stuff. But then it says in 41, but all the congregation of children of Israel grumbled against Moshe. Here's the thing that's a little bit baffling. You just saw Korah, now whoever was involved with him, literally their tents and those men, and like you said, Carmen, we know that not all of the descendants of Korah were gone, because later we have some Psalms, right? You literally see the ground open up and swallow them whole. This is supernatural. God is like, hey, let me show you something. Hey, by the way, these guys are in there. Now you just witnessed these men who are not supposed to be in the tabernacle. God's like, I'll take care of that. Boom, done. 250 of them, right? So then we get down to 41. Then it says, but all the congregation of the children of Israel grumbled against Moshe and against Aaron on the next day. So maybe they had some time to think about it. I don't know what's going on here. Saying, you have killed the people of Jehovah. He's like going, I didn't do anything. Their actions, they got what was coming, right? Then it says, and it came to be in verse 42, when the congregation assembled against Moshe and against Aaron, that they turned towards the tent of appointment, and see the cloud covered it, and a steam of Jehovah appeared to Moshe, and Aaron came before the tent of appointment, and Jehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, and this is the part here, God's like, that's enough. Like, I'm going to show you guys what time it is, because I've had enough. And Jehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, arise from the midst of this congregation, and let me consume them in a moment. And they fell on their faces. So Moshe said to Aaron, take the fire holder and put in it from the slaughter place, and lay incense on, because he is proper for him to do this. And go hurry to the congregation and make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out from Jehovah, the plague has begun. So for all this stuff, Carmen, you're talking about, Moshe is taking a verbal beating here, like left and right. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Did you bring us out here to die? Did you bring us out here to die? Hey, by the way, did you bring us out here to die? Hey, we don't have any meat. Well, that's what come out your nose. Hey, we don't have any water. Well, here you go. It's about everything they ever needed, God always took care of, and took care of it in a supernatural way, so that when they saw it, they could never go, well, that was just, oh, that water came from the rock. Man, it could happen. Well, it happens again, and he provides for them again. Then there's food for them always. They're never going without. So now the people again are saying, oh, now the guys who claim to be in charge, who really weren't, these were men of God, and now you killed them. And God's like, you know what? And I don't, honestly, this is me at this moment. People will say, oh, that was a test for Moses. I don't know. I think God was really going to wipe them out. I don't think this was so much a test for Moses as it was that we see the true heart of Moses as a leader, and why God picked him to be the leader of Israel. Mm-hmm. Because as a leader, he's laying his life down for his brethren. No greater love than any man has this, he lays his life down for his brothers. So instead of stepping aside, him and Aaron, they both just bow before the Father and say, and he tells Aaron, he says, hey, man, God's wrath has went out. I need you to do this. You got to go quick. They could have just sat back and go, you know what? I'm tired of y'all too. I'm tired of all the bickering. I'm tired of all the grumbling. I'm tired of all the stuff. You know what? Me and my boys, we'll just start the whole thing all over, right? We'll be like Noah's Ark again. Maybe there's 8 down to 8 families, and we're going to start the whole thing all over again. But it says that Moshe said to Aaron in verse 46, take the fire holder and put fire in it from the slaughter place and lay incense on it, and go hurry to the congregation and make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out from Jehovah, the plague has begun. And Aaron took it as Moshe commanded and ran into the midst of the assembly and saw that the plague had begun among the people, and he laid on the incense, and he laid on the incense and made atonement for the people, and stood. This is pretty cool here in a way, like this the way it's written. It says, and he stood between the death and the living, and the plague was stopped. And those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died on the account of Korah. Then Aaron returned to Moshe at the door of the tent of appointment, for the plague had stopped. This is incredible, man. It's like we're not talking about like days. We're talking about like that moment. Mm-hmm. That plague was moving through that camp so fast.
Yep.
So we see that to me, there's a little bit of Yeshua resemblance here in what Aaron's doing, where Yeshua was standing in between death and life when he crossed over to Sheol to come back victorious, and not only for himself, but for all of the world, and for the atonement of our sins, that we should be paying the same price that all these wicked people are paying right now.
Yeah, and the hard thing is, we keep looking at him like, how, like you said, how do you not get it? How do you not get it? Hey, the ground just swallowed these people up. What's the big deal? How are you like not having like, oops, repent, walk forward? And unfortunately, this is just the age-old tale. Like, that's why I think later in the New Testament, either James or Peter, we were reading, talking about, those of you who have seen, those who have seen did not believe, but those who have not seen still believe, and it's counted to them as faith. It's like these people are literally seeing on a day-to-day basis God move. Now, obviously, they got to see all the Egypt stuff. Duh. They got to cross a whole sea. Duh. But even outside of that, they're eating every day, like you said. Their clothes are surviving, and their shoes aren't getting old. They're getting water, and whether God walked into a brook or whether he split the rock, they had water everywhere they went.
Yep. For
million plus people, and all these animals, right? These animals aren't just drinking like little sips of cup of water. They're drinking. If you have a pool, they're taking the whole pool out just by themselves. So it's almost like in the New Testament, again, I can't remember the reference, but it's talking about people looking for a sign. Always looking for a sign, God's like, these people here were selected, elected, got the mountaintop experience, got the God coming down and burning the top of the mountain, got to see all the plagues, all the miracles, all the, the list. These are the most miracle-laden people ever. And they're still like, nah.
Nah, dog.
Yeah, I got other stuff to do. I got other plans. I got other ideas. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And as we keep looking through it, it's almost like, what are we looking for? We actually, if God would show up, if God would just heal me, if God would just do this, if God would just do that, right? We keep making this laundry list of like, I would believe if I could see this. Apparently not. Right. The Bible has been clear on that over and over again in our own lives. Like we've been saved and protected. We've had this, we've had that, and yet we're still running into all these issues and problems. But it's one of those things where when do the people get it? And it's not because of God's miracles. It's not because of anything special. It's because you have a heart for God. You have a relationship with God. Otherwise, that's it. You know what I mean? In any kind of miracle, any kind of God displaying something, that's not going to always be the answer. So that's where it's hard for us to see that. Like even here, we're going to see Aaron's staff buds. Like, how many times and how many ways do I have to show you? I mean, literally, am I going to have to like walk in front of your face and, like bring you to heaven for you to figure it out? And they're like, yeah, actually, whatever sign and wonder is not going to be good enough, which is no wonder, again, in Revelation, many signs and wonders, lying signs and wonders. Like, oh, you're looking for a sign? The devil's got tons of those. I'll give you a sign, but that's all you want. But if you're not looking for the relationship and to be a friend like Abraham was, then you're gonna be led astray regardless.
Yeah, I had a thought when y'all were both saying that is this maybe a way, how Yeshua talks about the narrow road and all that, and this is being shown from the Old Testament. Hey, even my people who walk with this pillar of fire and cloud they saw at the water from the rock, but they still didn't go.
Mhm.
And it's just showing us from the very beginning.
We there's a whole other side of Korah that nobody ever takes, or I don't want to say nobody, like I'm Nick the smart guy, but Korah was basically a false prophet, because you have all of these other, because it says congregation. So he has a following of people that are listening to everything that he's saying. So he is conflated the issue with Moses to the point that even when Moses speaks to Yahweh, consumes Korah's camp, you still have part of this congregation that goes, no, this is your fault, because they still have the heart of Korah because they were following him. So it also, I was trying to look up the word congregation. This isn't the whole camp of Israel. This is a small group of people. It is a congregation of people that have shown up, and basically they're following Korah now. They're following his lead.
Is that why it's only 14,000 and
Yes.
not
And
1.9
not
million?
1. Yes, exactly. So I find that interesting, because it's like, be very careful, because Korah was in a place of esteem. He was one of the temple priests. That he was a Levite. He had all this stuff going for him, but he decided he needed more, and he drug 14,000 other people down with him because of that. So,
Yeah, no bueno.
No.
Yeah, and in 17, this part, it's fairly, I don't want to call it simple, but we've gotten into talk before about what's the difference between a staff and a rod, and which one's being talked about here. You know, it says that it's staff, so this was not the rod, this was a staff. But the fact that it budded at all is like, I mean, huge miracle. And it's, you know, God always he's like going to let you know, who am I backing? You know, it's like talking about the feast days, you know, it says, go where I make my name known. And we've talked about that a few times. And God's always telling you, like, there's 30 options. I want you to pick that.
Yep.
Now, are these all bad? Not necessarily, but I'm asking you to pick this one. It's, you know, you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. You have to be discerning of, out of all these good, there's only one right. There's only one best, I guess is the right answer. And so he's like, oh yeah, all these staffs, you can lay them all out. I'm just telling you who I'm picking, which camp I'm choosing. The Aaron and his line forever. And so we see that go through Levi, and then eventually through Zadok, and then now that's the only one that continues through. And so, you know, it's like we're always second guessing and we're always double checking. And he's like, no, I'm going to let you know where I'm at. You know, I'm never just going to be, I'm not so far gone that you're not going to be able to understand. And we read the Bible out like, oh, God's a mystery. You know, oh, he's bigger than us. We're just never going to understand. He's like, no. I told you to search me with all your heart, because there is going to be a point where you're going to understand. There is going to be a point where you're going to know that one. You know, yes, there are 7 options. That one.
Yep.
He's like, I'm not going to just leave you out in the world to be like, oh, I don't know, God, which one should I be? Catholic, Seventh-day Adventist? Should I be a Mormon? Should I? You know, they all talk about Jesus. They all got some Bible stuff. And he's like, no, that one. This is the one that the people that, my laws, my statutes, my right rulings, you know, the things that I was very specific about that I said 800 times, that stuff. And so, you know, I think this is another scenario where he's like, I'm going to show you there is only one right answer.
Yeah. I don't mean false prophet. I mean false authority.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because I was like, wait a minute. Let's go to the true definition of a prophet. He wasn't prophesying.
But also, I want to kind of touch on the fact that, you know, we've had this discussion in the past with our other Torah studies where it's like the difference between a rod and a staff. A staff is usually something used when you're shepherding, or, you know, you're using for agricultural purposes, from my understanding. And a rod is actually the authority, because when he says in here, he says, now go, he wants each one of them to go. He says, in verse 17, verse 1, or chapter 17, verse 1, it says, and Jehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel and take from them a rod from each father's house. This is a sign of authority for that house. So this rod was not something that you shepherd with. It wasn't, you know, it was this rod represent your home, your authority. When you walked in public and you had this is a representation of your authority. So when he calls them out, he says, have them from them a rod each father's house for their leaders according to their father's houses, 12 rods, write each one's name on his rod. Then Aaron's and write Aaron's name on the rod of Levi, for there is one rod for the head of each father's house. You shall then place in the tent of appointment for the witness where I meet you, and it shall be that the rod of the man whom I choose buds. I shall rid myself of the grumbling of the children of Israel, which they grumble against you. And it's like, and again, it's the father saying, okay, here we go. So I'm going to do this now because you guys, you're going to understand this level of authority. So I'm going to do another supernatural thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Aaron's rod's going to bud. When he walks out, he's going to show, this is my guys right here. You are not those guys. You understand? Matter of fact, it was so important, this rod that was given to Aaron, that later was placed inside the Ark of the Covenant.
Right. So
that God would, for future generations to see, just in case you forget, because we have that convenient thing of la 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 la. Guys, like, no, when the men that I appoint are doing the right thing, and when I place inside the Ark of the Covenant, is as a reminder as well that this is the line of the priest for my house forever.
Mm-hmm.
Not for a season, not when you think they need to be kicked out. This is my line of priesthood forever.
Right.
Period.
And I think one other point, that that's been made previously is, it talks about spare the rod, spoil the child.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're talking about the rod from that perspective of the authority,
I was just thinking the same thing, dude.
Don't go beat your kid over the head with a stick. It's saying, hey, make sure your children, make sure your household has authority in its proper form and fashion. Make sure that you are led by the patriarchy, and that man is a man of God who's following the ways of Scripture. Of course, if he's a drunken nonsense guy, then that's going to make it a little more difficult. But if he's following God the way he should, if he's leading the household correctly, do not spare authority in your household. Don't let your children run rampant over you. Don't let the authority structure be shifted all over the place, where it's all about the kids and what their schedule, their football, their basketball, their baseball, whatever. It's like, no. You're the dad. You're the authority in the household. So what you say is the best for the family. Now, obviously, the man should be going to God for his instructions, and then like a little mini Moses, God, man, family, right? And it's the same thing: God, Moses, people. And so if you follow that path, then that is the way. That is the optimal path that God built for humanity. He didn't say this is the perfect path, because guess what? We are all imperfect people. But he said that is the optimal way of how he moves in that. So sparing the rod is sparing that authority, not just hitting your kids over the head,
right?
Which you have to do, I guess. But.
Yeah, so that for all the children who've ever gotten a whipping and the phrase was used, "Hey, spare the rod, spoil the child," we apologize for them on behalf of
But you probably deserved it.
Yeah, probably still needed it.
You probably still needed
it.
Yeah, right. So that's funny that you say that. I've seen the exact same thing. It was like, oh, so now we're getting a better understanding of authority structure. Mm-hmm. So it does give to me, gives a whole new meaning of spare the rod, spoil the child. It's like, hey, when you remove the authority structure from that child, and basically, hey, do whatever you want, man. Whatever's right in your eyes, have at it. Mm-hmm. And we see that didn't work out for Eli's sons too well, did it?
Right.
Oh, you guys are taking the best portions of the meat and the fat, and then doing other things you shouldn't be doing in the temple. Yeah. So there was a sparing of authority there, and it ended up costing them their lives.
And it's an easy thing to see in our world today. It's like, well, you get all the stuff, right? You can see it from movies and TV shows. But Dad, I really love him. But Dad, I want to go out late. But Dad, I need this car. But Dad, right? And it's like, well, I'm just going to sneak out and dye my hair. Well, I'm just going to sneak out and get a boyfriend. Well, I'm just going to, he's like, no. That one of the commandments that says you will live a long life is honor your father and mother. So these all work together. Father be in the proper authority structure. Children obey. So it's like the Bible gives you both sides. Dad, be in charge. Don't be an idiot. Kids, listen to your parents. Don't be an idiot. And both of those together should be the perfect marriage of the family dynamic. Yeah. But in our world today, it's like, well, if the parent says no dating, kids are like, whatever, I'm gonna go do it anyway. If the dad says, right, I don't want you, whatever, right? Go with me to church. I don't want to go. I'm just gonna sit in the back and go to sleep. You're like, no, I asked you to go because it's important to our life, and this is the authority that God's given me. That this is the right answer for our family. In our world today, like I said, between TVs and movies, and you brought it up, our culture is being run by 20-year-olds, of what's cool and what's popular. And he's like, no, that's not how this works. And parents need to, step up a little bit. Like, this is what we're doing. Yeah. And it's unpopular. Yep. Awesome. Thank you that it's unpopular. That means we're more set apart.
Yep.
we're actually actively working toward scriptural, standpoints versus worldly standpoints. But that's not what this chapter is talking about.
No.
All right, let's get on to 18 here.
18.
18.
Man, I'm losing Zoom every like 2 minutes. Keep saying unstable.
I've been having issues with my phone also, where I'm not like my signals are.
What's up? I haven't had any problems on YouTube. Yes, ma'am.
So in chapter 18, I had two different sets of scriptures. One was, excuse me, starting from verse 15 to 16, or verse 15 and 16, where it says, everything that opens the womb of all flesh, whether man or beast, which they offer to the Lord, shall be yours. Nevertheless, the firstborn of man you shall redeem, and the firstborn of unclean animals you shall redeem. And their redemption price at a month old you shall redeem them. You shall fix at 5 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, which is 20, I think it's pronounced garrets. And then jumping down to 28, verse 28 and 29, it says, so you shall also present a contribution to the Lord from all your tithes, which you receive from the people of Israel, and from it you shall give the Lord's contribution to Aaron the priest. Out of all the gifts to you, you shall present every contribution due to the Lord from each its best part is to be dedicated. Those verses are what stood out to me in this whole chapter.
Yeah, it's a common theme in our Anchor to Truth this morning. We talked about the Jacob giving a tenth of all he had to the Lord whenever he made his commitment and saw the ladder come down. And here we're seeing that play out again, which is now talking about the duty of the priests and Levites. Hey, still, it's all about that tenth. It's all about giving God what's his. So it's just a reoccurring theme. It seems like it just keeps coming up over and over again. Yeshua's talking about it. Give unto God what's God. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's. He's very consistent on we have to have an attitude of gratitude with the giving out of a cheerful heart. And I just don't ever see that going away. It seems like that's from page 1 with Cain and Abel and their offering, whatever Adam was doing that taught them how to do that, all the way through Revelation, where it says, keep the testimony of Yeshua and the commandments. So there's seems to be no shift or alteration of that style of living.
Mine said everything that openeth the matrix in all flesh. So y'all was obviously trying to tell us we live in a matrix. Take the right pill. No, I'm just kidding. Old King James Version.
So, Joe, what do you think? Because we've been talking about every week so far, and the Lord spoke to Moses. The Lord spoke to Moses. 18. So the Lord said to Aaron, is God talking to Aaron now? Maybe in a slightly less cool way, like not a face-to-face version, but a audible way, or is this one of the first ones where like God's like, I'm talking to you, buddy.
Yeah.
We've been talking.
Here's the thing. Aaron has always been a part of. So when Aaron would stand before, there's a lot of times we forget Aaron is there with Moshe.
Mm.
Now the father is typically directing that conversation straight through Moses to be said to whoever else. So, my opinion on this is it says the father spoke to him. So apparently it was clear enough for him to know, like, hey, this is the deal.
Mm.
Now, could that have been written and the father spoke to Moshe and then Moshe said unto Aaron? This is how he's hearing from Abba. So, that, for sure, I don't know. But it says, but this is directed at you. This is your house. This is what's going to take place.
Right.
This is your portion. This is what you're going to get. All the tithes of Israel all belong to you. You will not have any land because won't have the inheritance because I am your inheritance. So God's laying out. I think at this point, God is having to lay this out because there's been such a calamity taking place.
Right.
I mean, you got 250 guys who are holding censers with incense, and they're not even the right guys. There's a breakdown in here where at least Aaron would have been like, hey, whoa, time out, homies. You guys aren't even part of the family, and you're doing this. So I think we get to the point here where God's having to have that sit down talk with Aaron. We've already had the issue, right? at one point with, or we got that point. Yeah, we got that point, right? Where the golden calf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've already got this issue where this happens. That's strike one. Hey, man, what's up? Well, it just came out the fire all by itself. Oh, okay. All right. So now we get to this point here where it's like, this is where I think God's having to sit down with Aaron and his people saying, look, this is what it is. There's no one else to come before these things. There is no one. God's is basically laying it out for him, saying, this is what it's going to be. You will not have any land inheritance, but everything everyone brings to you is yours. There's no takesy backsies. There's none of that stuff. This is yours. Are we clear? Yes, sir. It's kind of like a dad sitting down with his kids.
Mm-hmm.
You have younger children. Mine are grown, but I have grandkids now. And there's times with Tobias. Tobias is 4. Tobias, look at me. No, Tobias, right here. Look at me. Tobias, right here. No, I'm like, no, this way. Literally, like, look this way. Because you want them to get, this is what I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to understand what I'm saying. And now for the older kids, my son's on here right now with Caleb. And with Caleb, his mind wanders like most young men or most kids. And I remember when he was younger, as a teenager, I would like, now, Caleb, repeat back to me exactly what I just said. Nick, you've been there plenty of time. And, and what would come out of my son's mouth would be the exact opposite of what I just said. And he goes, but that's what I heard. I said, but that's not what I said. No. And I even asked you after I said, do you understand?
Yes.
Yes. Repeat back to me what I'm saying. And Caleb would say something totally different.
I'd be like, Caleb, what are you listening to? Because that's not even the conversation we're having.
Better.
No better.
Yeah.
I'm sure he will comment on it.
He's like, I'm much better at listening.
But we've all been there. If you've helped raise kids or have kids or whatever,
or you were a kid.
Yeah. It's like, we understand, right? And they acknowledge, yes, right. What did I say? Then they say something totally different. You're like, that's not what I said. So that's what I feel like for me. This is Dad again, sitting down with Aaron. Hey, this is the order. This is the way it's supposed to take place.
Yeah, and then in 8, this kind of goes to Vicky's point earlier. It says, then the Lord spoke to Aaron, behold, I have given you charge of the contributions made to me. So these contributions are made to God through Aaron and the sons. All the consecrated things of the people of Israel, I have given them to you as a portion, and to your sons as a perpetual due. So again, whenever we hear that word perpetual, that means for a long time, or maybe forever, or always. What's interesting about that, though, is like, yes, we're not in temple tabernacle days. Yes, there's not a literal Levitical priest or Zadok priest or Melchizedek priest that we know of. So yeah, the form and fashion of that's going to be different. But then Yeshua tells us the poor will always be among you, aka you're always taking care of somebody. If you're ever in a place where you're not taking care of somebody in some form or fashion, to me that's where you might be in error, or according to Scripture, it sounds like you're in error. I don't want to be the judge on that, but I think we're called in some form or fashion always to be taking care of the poor, the orphan, the widows, the prisoners, I believe is another one. And then Yeshua goes as far as to say, well, when you take care of these people, you take care of these. It's like, well, God, Jesus, when did we do that to you? And he was like, well, when you take care of the less fortunate. And so he's like, even if you want to quote unquote minister unto me, if you want to show that you're your loyalty to me, it's actually by taking care of others. You're laying down your own needs and personal desires to make sure somebody else's life is a little bit better. Because he's like, I'm literally going to give my actual life to make sure life for all of you is forever better. So whether we have the Levitical system set up, or whether we have a go give them the left hind quarter of a cow, obviously that's not what's required anymore. But we all have the ability to help. And we can go through modern sermons. You have your time, your talents, and your treasures, right? These are all things that you can give of yourself, and God's expecting those things in some form or fashion. And again, it's not my place to tell you, you need to literally write a check for $397 because that's your bank account. But there is an attitude that God wants to see us of giving, of hospitality, of taking care of, because each person that you look at, they're the imago Dei, the image of God. So he's like, when you take care of these people, you're taking care of the best of my creation. And he's like, that's my heart. So then when you do that, you have a heart like my heart, aka and a heart like my son. That's the big thumbs up. That's when you get the God brownie points.
There you go. All right. Anything else in 18?
The very end, that's part B of 32. But you shall not profane the holy things of the people of Israel, lest you die. I think he ends with that sentence very tactfully. He's like, by the way, you've seen all these censors things that have been going on, all this other stuff that was happening. You mess up with the holy stuff, you die.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that with Aaron and his sons. We get that with the guy, I forgot his name, who touches the ark, because they're trying to ride it on a cart. He's like, I think the punishment was more for riding it on a cart. He said, I asked you to put poles in it and carry it. You want to put it on a cart? Well, that's why it tipped over. If you'd have listened, it would have never tipped over. So that's what you get for touching it. You should have never been in this situation to begin with. But if you touch the holy things, profane them, excuse me. So it didn't even say like that's why, people are like, well, David ate the showbread. Like, no, if you're profaning, there's a big difference. Like, what was the one we read with Dagon when they take the ark and they put it in there and the statue falls over? He's like, oh yeah. And then they all got the boils, and then they all got and then they all died. Right? He's like, hey, you profane my holy things. I told you. I literally let you know. And this is for inside the camp too. He's like, if you want to be a Korah, and you better enjoy rocks, because you'll be inside of them. I like rocks.
We're doing 19 also.
No, it's just 18.
That's all I was wrapping up at 3 o'clock.
Studying 19. Yeah.
You see the timing? See
That's it, man. All right, guys, let's head over to Samuel. First Samuel 14. Hey, lad.
Of course,
Or as my wife says, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that for a long time, and then I was like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
That's just this tradition of saying first and second.
Right.
Just like New and Old Testament, you're like, well, it's the older words and the newer words. But all right, so we're in 1 Samuel chapter 14. We get to start off with the guy that has my name. So
all right, it's a long one, lad.
Oh, yeah.
Might be 52 of them there. You're going to be okay.
One for each week of the year?
That's it. Give me some.
All right, let's make it happen. One day, Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side. But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah in the pomegranate cave at Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men, including Ahiah, the son of Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord at Shiloh, wearing an ephod. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Within the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a rocky crag. All right. On the one side of the rocky crag, on the other side, the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other was Sina. The one crag rose on the north in the front of Michmash, and the other on the south in front of Gabah. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, come, let us go over to the garrison of the uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few. And his armor bearer said to him, do all that is in your heart, do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul. Then Jonathan said, behold, we will cross over to the men, and we will show ourselves to them. If they say to us, wait until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place, and we will not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand. And this shall be the sign to us. So both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves. And the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us, and we will show you a thing. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. And then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, and his armor bearer after him. And when and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed them after him. And the first strike which Jonathan and his armor bearer made killed about 20 men within as it were half a furrow's length of in an acre of land. And there was a panic in the camp in the field, and among all the people, the garrison, and even the raiders trembled. The earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. And the watchmen of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude was dispersing here and there. Then Saul said to the people who were with him, count and see who has gone from us. And when they had counted, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. So Saul said to Ahiah, bring the ark of God here, for the ark of God went at that time with the people of Israel. Now, while Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the camp of the Philistines increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and went into battle. And behold, every Philistine sword was against his fellow. And there was very great confusion. Now the Hebrews who had been with the Philistines before that time, and who had gone up with them into the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. Likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they too followed hard after them in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed beyond Beth Aven. And the men of Israel had been hard pressed that day, so Saul had laid an oath on the people, saying, cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged on my enemies. So none of the people had tasted food. Now, when the people came to the forest, behold, there was honey on the ground. And when the people entered the forest, behold, the honey was dropping. But no one had put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. So he put out the tip of his staff that was in his hand and dipped in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. Then one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright because I tasted a little bit of honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies that they found. For now, the defeat among the Philistines has not been great. They struck down the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, and the people were very faint. The people pounced on the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slaughtered them on the ground. And the people ate them with the blood. Then they told Saul, behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. And he said, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone to me here. And Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, let every man bring his ox or his sheep and slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So everyone of the people brought his ox with him that night, and they slaughtered them there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he built to the Lord. Then Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light. Let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. But the priest said, let us draw near to God here. And Saul inquired of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. And Saul said, come here, all of you leaders of the people, and know and see how this sin has arisen today. For the Lord lives who saves Israel through, though it may be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But there was not a man among all the people who answered him. Then he said to all Israel, you shall be on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. Therefore Saul said, O Lord God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant this day? If this guilt is on me or in Jonathan my son, O Lord God of Israel, give Urim. But if this guilt is in your people Israel, give Thummim. And Jonathan and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. Then Saul said, cast the lot between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the tip of my staff that was in my hand. Here I am, I will die. And Saul said, God, do so to me, and more also, you shall surely die, Jonathan. Then the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation in Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, there shall not one hair on his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. When Saul had taken the kingship over Israel, he fought against all the enemies on every side, against Moab, against the Ammonites, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he routed them. And he did valiantly and struck the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hand of those who plundered him. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan, Ishbi, and Malchishua. And the names of his two daughters were these. The names of the firstborn was Merab, and the name of the younger Michal. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the names of the commanders of the army were Abner and the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. There was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he attached him to himself.
You need a nap after that. That was a long one.
Just a sip of water.
I found it interesting in 45, where at the end of 45, yours said, God this day, so the people ransomed him. Mine says, so the people rescued Jonathan, that he did not die.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think I need a nap after that one.
And the cool thing is he didn't die.
Yeah.
Well, so what I found kind of interesting was these vows. I think that's why we talked about be careful what you vow, because how often have we seen like Saul's vow ends up almost killing his son?
Mm-hmm.
Jacob's vow, like anyone who touches the idol will be killed, right? And then come to find out, was it Rebecca, right, who had the idols under her on the camel or whatever?
Yeah.
So and then of course she's the one who touches it, and he's like, oh man, if I would have known you had idols. So it's like, be very careful what you vow, what you say you will and won't do, and especially if you're saying before God this day, any man who eats, and you're like, how are you going to know random dude who has nothing to do with you is out there doing the wrong thing? Now you got to kill him because you said the wrong thing, not knowing that it was wrong. You probably thought it was a good thing. So these vows are seemingly very important because they keep coming back almost in a way of like biting that person in the butt. And maybe it plays out the way it's supposed to play out still, but it seems more often than not, it's if you're making a vow, especially without God's instruction prior to, it ends up getting you in trouble.
Let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Yay.
Well, a lot of times it's like the scene from Beauty and the Beast where it's like promises you don't intend to keep. So some of the times we got to be very careful where we are in our walk, and if we've prayed and if we fasted and done everything we're supposed to do, because we like to make all these promises and vows to God and get really, up in our sanctimonious righteousness. And then it's like, but are you doing this because you're making a vow to God because your heart is after him, or are you doing this because you want something, or your heart is in the wrong spot?
Right. I'm always reminded of people I grew up with that would indulge in the adult beverages a little too much, and then be going to what we call the porcelain god and making vows to God, saying, "Oh God, I'll never drink again if you just help me get me through this. If you just do, I'll never touch it again." It's like, good chance you did touch it again. You still went back to it later.
And then when you go back, it's even worse.
Yeah, we're looking for that reprieve from something that that we messed up on, and we're begging God, if you'll do this for me or whatever, I'll do this, or whatever it might be.
Need Taco Bell.
No. Nope. Hey.
No, I never do that.
Offended. All right. One of the questions I wanted to ask, because I was reading it, and I mean, I can't, my brain couldn't stop thinking about it, was on 14. It says, and that first strike which Jonathan and his armor bearer made killed about 20 men.
Right.
Within it, and half the furrow's length of an acre. I don't know what any of that stuff is, but like did he drop a rock? Was it part of the earthquake that they said that then the earthquake? Because I mean, how's one of anything going to kill 20 people?
Dude,
A bazooka?
I don't know, but I tell you what, like I get because his armor bearer is bearing all his swords and stuff like that, right? So he has nothing. So is it just him like literally leaping up like the superhero leap where he puts his hand on the ground and just like?
I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
people.
One strike, 20 people?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're William Wallace with the the 20-foot sword or something, and you do the super Zelda spin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm
Well, I
curious to see.
think this is what this is saying though. This is their first hand at battle. This is the first strike.
Oh, so like their first attack.
Yeah.
This strike. Like,
This isn't like okay. When this guy shows up, we're gonna all just lay down. Pulls his sword out like this. Everybody's like, "Oh!"
It's like the one where they slide it in.
Yeah. So I think that's what it's saying. It's like this is their first hand at battle, but still, it's Jonathan and his shield bearer or armor bearer here. So it's like, it's telling us basically that Jonathan went in there and he took care of 20 dudes.
Yeah.
You got that in you?
they're like,
You got that in you, bro?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah.
before
Even
he
showed
shows
it
up,
correctly.
they're like
Yeah, I
rock,
know.
paper, scissors, and they're like, "Sorry, Gary, you're gonna have to be hit first." He's like, "I don't want to take the hit."
Well,
you lost rock, paper, scissors.
wherever they went though was pretty treacherous ground because he said he had to go up on his hands and feet. So I mean, you're literally like crawling up wherever he was to get to. So I mean, it wasn't like he had a whole army with him and he had the high ground from from Star Wars. It was, hey, you know what? I gotta get to where you're at. Then I'm gonna ask the question that either you tell me to come up or you come down, and I know which one equals what. So he's like, oh, you tell me to come up? Oh, we won this. And can you imagine, like, this is kind of like that Caleb Joshua faith where they're like, oh, we got this. No, we need to go today. Let's go right now because God's already on our side.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I have no questions on what this is going to result in. I'm just going to show up with my dude. He's got all my stuff. Hey, give me the short sword because it's kind of tight quarters in here. Taking out.
Hey, for all we know, man, Saul was already head and shoulders taller than everybody else. So for all we know, his son was the same way. I don't think we've ever given a description of his size or anything like that, but
But not one hair on his head fell to the ground.
Yeah. That's where you see a slow motion where the blade comes in. It's like just goes right by the hair.
What's kind of funny to me is in 11 where it says, "And the Philistines said, Behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they have hidden themselves."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, look, a Hebrew. Sorry, it just struck me as funny.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, they've been hiding all this time, and all of a sudden they're just here.
Well, remember they were being like persecuted,
right?
They had to go down to the Philistines to get their axes sharpened. They had to go down to the Philistines for this. They were literally like slaves to the Philistines. And he was like, "Oh yeah, you want to keep making bad decisions?
Yeah.
Oh, you think you're in charge? Look, I'm gonna put these people over here in charge of you. And if you want anything done, you got to go to talk to them and grovel, essentially." So they're, like I said, they're coming out of the holes. They're literally like, "Am I allowed to even be here? Is anybody gonna kill me? I don't know." It's like, this is the land that you were promised.
Right.
This is your land. What are you doing? So, when you finally see the strong guys show up, he's like, that's why they rallies the people, because they're like, even then it was like, then a couple more people came out, then a couple more, then the next tribe heard. They're like, oh wait, what? The Philistines are getting attacked? Well, let's go too. Now that they're already in confusion and killing themselves, let's all now we can find the strength. You're like, oh, it took that.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. Let's not just limit his story here, Jonathan, to just his first smiting. Because it says, there was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people, the outposts and the raiders also trembled, and the ground shook. And said it became a trembling of Elohim. And the watchmen of Saul in Gabah melting away, and they went here and there. And Saul said to the people who were with him, "Please inspect and see who has gone from us." Like, what is happening here?
Right.
Like,
how is this happening?
Like, I'm over here,
right,
and that's happening over there. Like who in our campus over there basically taking care of business, Oh, by the way, Saul, it was your son Jonathan. Right. He didn't tell us that he proceeded before us. It's like,
It's Jonathan and his armor bearer, sir.
It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. But that's where Saul should have been like, my boy.
Instead of, I vow, if anybody eats, you're like, what are you doing?
I know.
You weren't even a part of this. Just sit at home and take a break, get some water.
Yeah.
Go eat a pomegranate.
About that. What is going on? And I've read this before. the issue with eating with the blood. So, what are y'all's thoughts on that? Eating with the blood. Why was that a sin against God?
Because it's forbidden in the Torah to eat the
Okay.
blood. Yeah.
I mean,
And even way before the Torah,
Right.
this Torah,
Mhm.
that it was already a law in effect in the tables of heaven. We go back to the book of Jubilees. Noah tells his boys, hey, when I die,
Nope.
don't go eat the blood.
Nope.
And they go eat the blood.
Right.
So that's just one of the commandments of the Father not to do that.
Well, and it's interesting too because Saul, it's like Saul's two-face or something. Like
Right.
every 1 minute he's doing the right thing, next minute he's doing the wrong thing. He's like literally just all over the place, and it's like it's hard to. You want to give the man his credit and his accolades because he's doing awesome, but then he makes like dumb choices along the way because and I think it's God's way of showing the smallness of man. Like he's like, oh, that's a king. To you, that's a big deal, but
Right.
to me, that's just another human being amongst the other human beings.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he's like, watch how Saul moves. He's an awesome guy. He's big. He can handle battle. His son is obviously a warrior to some extent, but yet he's doing like silly stuff, But yet you see him he's like in his brain. He's like, wait, you guys are eating with the blood. He's like, well, somehow that can't be right. He's like, I know better than that. I might not be winning all the battles, but get the big rock and let's kill it and make the blood drain out. Like, let's do what we know to do. We've been doing this forever. Why would we now change the mentality?
Why are you eating with blood right now?
Well, and you're acting like savages.
Yep.
You're going behind the Philistine camp, and you're like, oh, they got stuff. We're gonna take their stuff and kill it and eat it. And he's like, no, wait, you don't just go and kill it. You take the cows home,
Right.
and then you've now increased your stuff. Right. You now say, like when you talk about Job, he had this many cattle and this many goats. He didn't just go kill them all because he had them. That's part of your livelihood. That's part of your currency. So them acting in the way they did, like just take all the stuff and kill all the stuff and eat it.
Right.
Eat it right now. We don't even have time.
They were hungry, bro. Come on, man.
That's what I was kind of getting at was the disrespect of life and obviously they knew better. Obviously they knew they're not supposed to be, but they're like letting the stuff bleed out while they're eating it.
Right.
It's just like,
yeah, they're doing
Come
all
on,
of it wrong, but it's because they're so focused in that moment. They're like, I'm going to eat right this minute. Like, I don't want to take the time to slaughter this properly, to set it up, blah, blah, blah. They're like, oh, we're just going to eat this right now. Not to mention, it talks about the fruit of your spoils. You're supposed to give what? A tenth to God. What are they giving to anybody?
right.
They're literally just hand to mouth.
Yep.
As fast as I can eat this is how fast I'm going to eat it.
Right.
And so they're breaking so many principles here. But Saul's like, well, let's at least get like the stone altar and kill it correctly. Come on, guys.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm not perfect, but we can't do that. You know what I mean? And so, it was really interesting, especially because his son's like, oh, I'm just eat a little bit of honey,
Right.
and his eyes got brightened. And I'm really trying to figure out what that means. You know what I mean? Like, what is like? Was he just hungry and like you get a little bit of sugar in your system? You're like,
Right.
woo, let's go. Or was it just something like supernatural where God was like, oh yeah, I'm not going to have you be a part of this vow. You're not going to know nothing about it. So it's not going to be sin to you.
Right.
It can't be sin for something you had no idea.
Right.
If some president in Zimbabwe says, Jonathan, you're not allowed to do this, how would I know? You know what I mean? But I think once Jonathan knew, then he's like, oh, I've done no wrong. He kind of gives that story of like, and the people were like, oh, he did. How are you going to, kill him? Like, we'll ransom him or would you say, rescue him?
Rescue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of this too with Saul is there's an inner conflict happening here with him also because he knows I'm king, but I know at some point don't know who the boy is or who the man is yet. That's coming later in the story, but I think there's an inner conflict happening with him that's clouding part of his judgment as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so you send your people out there, and all of a sudden, I think that's where it gets to the point where it's like Jonathan's kind of like, hey man, I just barely put a little bit of honey in my mouth, and all of a sudden I'm ready to roll, which has natural vitamin B12, I believe, or some type of natural, energy within the honey.
We don't have to get science.
Yeah. But it was like, he's saying, hey, how much better in verse 30? How much better if the people had eaten well eaten today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found? For then would not the slaughter among the Philistines have been greater? And it says, so he's saying, hey, we would have had a better victory if everyone had energy to fight.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go out there on an empty stomach. You can't go out there, no carbs, no nothing. You just go out there and literally, do your thing.
Shakes, protein bar, something.
Have more protein. It says and it says, and they struck the Philistines that day from Mishma to Ayalon. Well, I'm not saying it right here, but so the people were very weary, and the people pounced on the spoil. I think this too is that they're literally so hungry, like they're like literally like we get to the point where we're hangry.
Yeah.
We can just grab a Snickers here. They didn't have a Sphinx or wherever else they can stop off at, except for the one in Egypt. But they didn't have a place they could stop off at and fill up on some little burritos or whatever. It's like no, we're hungry. You like that one?
I mean, it's a Sphinx, but I still like it.
Yeah, I know, but
No, I like it. You won that.
Okay. So I was trying, dude. But here's the deal. That goes to show you that they were so hungry that they didn't even want to wait till the meat was cooked or drained properly. Like, we're starving.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I kind of get that. They're not doing the right thing here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Saul comes and goes, whoa. Let's bring it over here. You know how to do. Let's cook this meat up the right way. Let's all eat the proper way. Mm-hmm. So again, you see Saul, to me, this is where I start seeing that part of him where he starts wavering back and forth.
Yeah.
And that internal battle that's going to take place. That at some point, that while the unclean spirits are bothering him, that later down the road, you're going to see when David played the harp, that it put those at bay. And then you see a little bit of more of a power struggle here, I think, in verse 42, where it says, and Saul said, cast lots between my son Jonathan and me, and Jonathan was taken. And then of course Dad, the son's like, hey, explain to me, what have you done?
Right.
What are you doing?
Wait, I just won the battle. What are we talking about, dying or what?
Hey, Dad, didn't you just hear that rumbling that was over there and people's hearts melting and a little half acre of land? I was taking care of business, me and my armor bearer.
Right.
You forget about this? It's like,
wait, I gotta die because of that?
But it's kind of cool. The people stood up and they're like, hey, whoa. Jonathan doesn't need to die. He's like, it says, but the people said in verse 45, but the people said to Saul, should Jonathan die, who has wrought this great salvation in Israel? So again, this is that inner conflict. I'm going to see this going to play out. Because when David gets on the scene, oh, here we go again. Mm-hmm. Another whippersnapper is going to be like, whatever. And it says, and let not one hair on his head fall to the ground, for he has wrought with Elohim this day, lest the people ransom Jonathan, and he did not die. Mm-hmm. So kudos to the people.
Well, and I also wanted to point out a little bit of Jonathan's heart, because in 43 it says, and Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you've done. So he's like, hey, what happened? Like, why are we in this predicament? And then he says, Jonathan, I tasted a little bit of honey. So apparently he knew what was the thing he quote unquote did wrong. He immediately fesses up to it. Like, he didn't say, like, I kill people. He's like, all right, I tasted some of the honey that was in my hand. Here I am. I will die. So he's like, oh, hey, if you vowed it, then I'll take responsibility, because apparently that's, it happened. So you can really see that. I'm not saying that Jonathan was right in that, but you can see he wasn't trying to fight it and be bratty or try to get around the system. He's like,
right,
hey, if we put the two camps on either side and we cast lots and it was on me, he's like, who am I to argue? Yep. At the same time, in his heart, he's like, I don't understand. He's like, all it did was taste a little honey. Like, even the way he describes it, it was like, it's not like I went out here and like went to Arby's and had a whole meal with appetizers. He's like, I just had a little honey just to keep myself going. It was literally falling out of the tree. He's like, why would you not? This is kind of dumb. It's almost like, I've never been anywhere where honey's just out. You imagine, you're like, oh, God must have set me up with this. Appreciate you, because I definitely would like some sweet. And back then, the sweet was, we think of it today as we can just have sweets whenever we want. Back then, the sweets was like a
delicacy.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's just here, and I can just have some. Mm-hmm. Hey, yeah, let me just get a little bit. So I'm sure he thought of it as a blessing. He thought of it as, hey, God's providing right now. He's like, well, I gotta die because I had some. I didn't even stop to eat. I just dipped a little bit and kept going.
Wait, Dad, what did you do? I was dumb.
Yeah, Saul was about to lollipop him in the head.
All right. Anything else, guys, on that?
That's all I got to say about that.
That's all I got to say about that, man.
I do like that, whether this is for good or for bad. I think we'll probably get the answer later. In 52, there was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. So he's like, oh yeah, I'm constantly fighting with these Philistines. Like that's my lot in life is to fight the Philistines. But then he says, and when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he attached him to himself. So I wonder if that's only of like Israel, the 12 tribes, or if this was like literally any strong guy is like, hey, bring him here, bring him under my rule. And that's where we're kind of getting some more of this mixing built in of you see Saul's judgment, at least the way it's written, it's very vague. Like it says any strong man. It didn't say any Israelite dude or any prophet or any priest. It was like any strong man, anybody valiant man, any warrior, yeah, bring them here. And the way I perceive it is he's starting to attach himself to the world. He's starting to say strength is better than faith. If I can go get more strong guys, then I can beat these Philistines that I'm fighting all the days of my life. Maybe I'll win out of sheer numbers, out of strength, versus, hey, God, you go before me and just wipe this out. Or, send in Jonathan 10 times and then we're good. You know what I mean? Like, it just was one of those, as I read that, I was like, maybe that wasn't the best choice. Right. But I think we'll see the ramifications further down the line of his focus is not, like I said, it's dual focus. It's like, I'm going to do the right thing, but I really need a strong man. God's like, that's what I told you a king is. He's going to be focused on earthly things because he's a king. That's his job is to handle the earth, take care of people and government and the sacrifices. And God's like, yeah, he's going to ask for all your strong men. He's going to ask for contributions. He's going to take your children. You're going to go to war. That's what a king does. Yep. So he's doing what a king does. But he's still got that God side attached to him with Samuel and stuff where he's like, yeah, but we have to do this still.
Yep.
Well, let's make sure we never leave that too far gone. But yeah, just attaching yourself to any strong guy. He's like, hey, Goliath, bring him over here.
Right.
And it kind of makes you wonder why you see that story later with David and Goliath. David's like, oh, no. We're not taking you captive. We're not bringing you in. I'm killing you. Like you're in opposition.
I'm going to cut your head off.
Yeah. Just to make sure.
Yep. Good job.
Yes.
Man, these books way back here are like hard to find. You got 10 pages to flip through. You're like one at a time. Uh-oh. Do you want to skip this one, Joe?
Why?
You want to skip chapter 3?
Why?
We're gonna get in trouble. We gonna get in trouble.
Do it, man.
No, I do it for everybody. I love the Bible. All right. 1 Peter chapter 3.
Needed to read the first part super loud.
Not loud.
I'm just kidding.
Well, for some reason, mine's like bolded and highlighted and underlined. I like a clean Bible.
Me too.
I take notes elsewhere. All right, so you guys should all have flipped there by now. That's 1 Peter chapter 3. Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. When they see your respectful and pure conduct, do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And you are her children if you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the women as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless for those, for to you, one more time, for to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. For whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and the ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you shall be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, But in your heart, honor Christ the Lord as holy always, being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through water. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, with the angels, authorities, and powers having been subjected to him. Okay. That's a good chapter.
Yeah, it is.
Mhm.
Any ladies want to jump in first?
I have a question about verse 6.
Do it.
So mine says, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and you will become her children if you do what is right without being frightened by any fear. And I was looking by different translations because I was wondering, what does it mean by frightened by fear?
Mhm.
Can you give me thoughts?
So the way I've always read that is when you're appealing to a higher authority, whenever you're submitting, essentially, not in the weird way that other people use it, but when you're submitting to like the law, the authority, the president, the boss, anybody who's in charge of you, there's a little bit of fear there of saying, if that person's not doing what's right, I'm also not going to be doing what's right. If they lead me into the pit, I'm going to fall into the pit. So there's a fear of saying, you're in charge, you're the one who's going to tell me what, when, and how to do things, because you're literally listening to God, and your goal is to, share that with me. There's going to there is an innate fear, that's hard to say, of the unknown, because you're not living by your own ways, your own desires, your own will. You know what I'm saying? Well, I would do this, but he's like, but my husband said that. Well, that's scary, because you're like, this isn't what I would do. What if he's wrong? What if we all die together? What if we're all broke together? And he's like, well, that's why it says, later, for the husband, also you better take care of your business, or your prayers are hindered. So if you want to hear what you need to hear to keep her from being afraid, you need to make sure you're on your game too. So it's a dual-sided story, but I think the fear comes in with the giving up of the personal action. I don't know if that's the right answer, but
That's all. There's many different interpretations in this verse.
oh yeah. Depends on what time of the history you read. This verse is going to be completely different. In 2024, this verse reads totally different than it did 20 years ago. Yes, ma'am.
So on that same verse, talking about do not fear, my note says, in dealing with unbelieving husbands, the wives were to maintain their commitment to Christ while at the same time showing proper deference to their husbands. The difficulties involved could lead to displeasure and intimidation on the husband's part, and thus to fear on the wife's part.
For me, when it comes to these particular writings, anything that has to do with women submitting and all that. So these are usually can be touchy things. It could be trigger things. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of good teachings on these. We're going back to what we just read in the Torah with Korah. Hopefully that thing doesn't blow up over there. Yeah, I know. But the point being is that when we operate within the parameters and the boundaries that God set up, it's good for everybody. And where these teachings about wives be subject unto your husband and all this stuff, a lot of times in the church growing up, these were not modeled in a proper way because it all becomes about the woman. You obey, you do as I say, all this other stuff. What we need to realize with all this needs to be read in the context of, verse 7, it says, in the same way,
Mhm.
husbands live understandingly together, giving respect to the wife as the weaker vessel and as being heirs together of the favor of life. You are both heirs together in this walk, right? Lost my place. Heirs together of the favor of life, so that your prayers are not hindered. So he's telling the men, hey, if you're not loving your wife, if you're not laying down your life, if you're not doing the right thing, yeah, I've placed you as the hierarchy, as the head of your home, as the covering for your family, for your wife and your children. But at the same time, if you're not walking out your role correctly, God says that your prayers will be hindered.
That's how you can have an answer whenever there's a problem that comes up. You're like, God, help me with this. He's like, oh yeah, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. I'm not answering that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it says to sum up, let all of you be like-minded, sympathetic, loving as brothers, tender-hearted, humble-minded, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But on the contrary, blessings, knowing that you were called to this in order to inherit a blessing. So all these things that we're seeing is like, yeah, there's a proper role in a relationship with husband and wives.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, this is me. Sarah, you don't have to fear anything because you're trusting in Abraham. You're trusting in your husband. He is your covering, God, and then God is his covering. Mm-hmm. And Abraham, it was counted to him as righteousness, right? He was called a friend of God. So Abraham was apparently doing what he was supposed to do. This blessing flows from the Father to Abraham, to his wife, and to all his descendants forever. Mm-hmm. So there's this blessing of flowing. God's like, hey, and guess what? Like my wife the other day when she came back from the women's retreat and she gave me a hug, she's like, I'm so thankful to be home. I feel very secure when I'm around you. Yeah, it was our little touchy moment, right? She says, I feel protected when I'm around you. There's nothing for her to fear when she's here with me at all. So that's where I look at this thing with Abraham. Sarah had nothing to fear. Hey, by the way, I know that you're going to be older in life. And it does say that Sarah kind of chuckled. And one angel's like, whoa. Is that your wife over there laughing? What's up with that? You can take care of business now.
Something funny to you?
Something funny. But he's like, hey, you don't have to fear this. You don't have to fear anything that's going on. Hey, by the way, when she's taken twice as someone else's, hey, don't fear this. Everything's going to work out. God's got a plan. We're going to work. Even though we may have messed up some places here, God's going to take care of it. So again, in the proper order of things, when he talks about the women to be subject unto your own husbands, that's because there's a blessing in that. When the people of Israel were subject unto Moshe and to Aaron and the high priest and did what they were supposed to do, when they brought their tithes to the temple, because that's how the priests ate. You guys don't own land. You don't own nothing. People, you got to understand, and the rest of the people had to understand, these guys are doing you a service. They're the ones who are working before Jehovah on your behalf. You need to bring this to them so they can eat. Because without you, they go hungry, then this whole thing falls apart. Within the system of marriage, God's like, hey, there's an order here. It doesn't mean because I placed him in charge that now that makes him of more value. This isn't about a value thing. This isn't about, the man is more valued than the woman. No. You both, it says right here, you're both co-heirs in the promise.
We end up in the same place.
Well, yeah.
But you both got to walk out your roles. Hey, dummy, too, don't take advantage of your wife and your kids. Don't treat them like garbage, because when things do go sideways, I'm kind of going to turn a deaf ear to you. I'm not going to really hear what you got to say because you haven't been doing the things you need to do. Right. How about go back and start loving your wife the way you're supposed to love them, and love your children the way you're supposed to love them, and be the man I called you to be. Oh, by the way, son, you need something? Here you go. Yeah. So
when I think, like I said, I've read through these, like I said, I believe in the Bible. I do what the Bible says. That should be our goal and aim, is to follow these words and do them as best we can. What I think, like Joe was saying, it's because of the history of the world and the history of religion, but I'll definitely put the whole label of religion on there. Most modern religions are male oriented and everybody else is lower than, and it's God's like, no, I love and cherish all the human beings. There's roles and expectations. Like sometimes there's elders and pastors and the people who clean and the people who do this, people who do that. He's like, none of them are less than. We're all part of the same body, right? The same group of people. There's not. He later tells you, what can the eye do without the hand? Can the hand do without the foot? And all of it has to work together. But he's like, I've given each person and each gender their specific roles, and it's very important to fulfill those specific roles because that's how the party works the best together. Same thing with the luminaries. I gave you multiple luminaries; they all work together. There's not one better than the other one, or only look at this one, don't look at that one, or this one's in charge, so that one's trash. It's like there's no distinguishment of like anybody's less than. It's a hey, this is your secondary role, or like the moon is this is your secondary role. It's you're a witness to, you're a help. Thank you for helping. Right, but everything works better because you are here. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we address is, talking about that word subject or submit. It's scriptural. It's based on the Bible, but we can't forget, especially the men. So I know we always try to be balanced here, but men are subject or submitting like all the time, every day, right? We got a boss. We got if you got to work. If you don't have a boss, if you got God, so you're always underneath multiple layers of people. Even if you're in a room with multiple men, somehow, some way, the way men work is they just kind of know, hey, he's the number one, I'm the number two, I'm the number three. They just kind of work that scenario out without even talking. You're like, hey, if Joe says we need something done, it's like, three guys are like, all right, I got it. They're not gonna be like, oh, who told you that you're in charge, right? And then there's this big power struggle. It's just you kind of learn I don't want to call it a pecking order, but essentially it's
hierarchy.
Yeah, it's a hierarchy, and it's just built into humanity. That's why Korah was having a problem because he didn't appreciate the hierarchy. It was evident and obvious to everybody. It was Moses, Aaron, maybe 1-2, maybe 1A, 1B, other people, and Korah was like, no, I want to be 1A, 1B, 1C. I want to be up here in the top with the cool people. He's like, I didn't set you up that way. So Korah need to learn how to submit. Right, men are in a constant state of submission, especially because our submission is a perfect authority of God and the perfect standard of God, and I almost kind of feel like a little bit jealous, with this marriage talk is the woman is submitted to the husband who's imperfect. So you're like, yeah, I have to meet an imperfect standard and I get to be good. Awesome. The man has to go meet the perfect standard. Ha ha. When you get to heaven, you got to do all this. Ha ha. But at the same time, that puts all that extra, it should put that extra pressure, that extra, the positive pressure, like, what's the word I'm looking for? The desire for more righteousness, right? Like with Abraham, he's like, if I'm going to be the guy that my wife's going to submit to, I have to be A+. I can't walk around and be B- and C- and then expect everything to work out clearly because then that's why my prayers are going to be hindered. So whenever I go home and I'm like, God, we're having this issue at home. What do I do? And he's like, well, it's your own sin. It's your own fault. So you got to walk this consequence out. But if you're living righteously, he's like, oh, what you need to do is this, and that. He's like, oh, thank you, God. Because, these people that you created, right? Like Moses said, these humans, gosh, I'm tired of dealing with them.
Yep. I want to go back to right at the beginning because it doesn't give it gives a hierarchy, but it doesn't give the wife a free pass because it says you guys are spiritually like almost the rebar in the concrete. Because likewise, ye wives in subjugation. Sorry. Ye wives being subject to your own husbands, that if any of the husbands not obey the word, they also may, without the word, be won by the conversations of the wives. While they behold your chastened conversation coupled with fear or respect for your husband, let not your adornments be gold and baubles and stuff like that. Let it be how you are to God. And then it says quiet and reserved, basically. But then it says, for all of this manner, in the old time, the holy women also adorn themselves. So we saw throughout the Bible with Esther and Sarah and all these other people, they're the ones who saved a whole bunch of issues because of their respect and reverence for Yahweh, despite the fact that their husbands were doing not good things. So,
well, like look at Rebecca with she's like, hey, Jacob, by the way, yeah. And then Isaac's like, but Esau. And Rebecca's like, don't worry, I'm going to be calm and peaceful, and I'm going to do everything I'm supposed to do. I'm going to win him over, And eventually Isaac's like, oh yeah, Jacob, woohoo!
Yeah, exactly. So it's telling the women why they need to be this way is because that structure is twofold. Like I said, it's the rebar within the concrete. You can't have you can have concrete without rebar, but it's not as strong as with the rebar, with the netting and stuff like that. So you have to have structure there that supports each other.
Right.
So it's not just, hey, let's women should be in the kitchen and cooking and cleaning and making babies. It's you need to be spiritually on your guard, and you need to be spiritually astute also, and you have a place in God's heart, and he reverences or has reverence for you differently than he holds men, the accountability for you that he holds differently for men. And then it says, knowing that the wife is a weaker vessel. It's talking about the physical vessel. So that's why I meant we are built for specific roles. Men are built to do heavy labor. Men are built to do that type of stuff.
Part of the curse. Go work and deal with the thorns and sweat.
Yeah, exactly. So just throughout this whole whole chapter verse, it's just describing in detail what has to happen for a family unit to be successful.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things I definitely wanted to add in here was, we were always reading like the man of God is, the man of God is, the man of God is, the pastor, this whole section here with Peter and Paul, these ending letters and stuff this is how you set up a church. This is how you get an elder. This is how you get a pastor, a man of one wife, who's right? All the stuff, the raising their kids the right way, all these details. And then there's very few verses that are like, okay, now women, this is for you. Mm-hmm. So that's why whenever we do get those, those are obviously like, hey, focus here. He's like, I've set the men up because of their role. That if they don't do their job, the whole unit's gonna be messed up. So I need to make sure that they are focused, that they get their job. And then once the women kind of jump in here, it's like, hey, this is the definition of being holy from your perspective. Now there's the overall humanity perspective of, don't sin and follow God, read the word, listen to the Spirit. That's all human beings. But then he's like, hey, when it comes to specifically women, it's like, this is how in God's sight you're very precious. This is what's considered holy. This is what's considered good. And, so that's in no way like a man lording over a woman. That's like, it's like, this is God from his eyeballs looking at you like, this is what's pretty to me. This is what makes me want to hold you in the palm of my hand and call you friend. Is when you live like this. So this isn't about you saying, yes, husband, do whatever you want, because that's the wrong perspective. It's yes, God, this is how you view me. Right. And then in this scenario, when he's working how he's working and I'm working how I'm working, this actually works best because God's looking at both of us and he's holding us in each hand. He's like, oh, you guys are so sweet. Here you go. Right. I'm going to bless everything you're doing. I'm going to take care of you behind the scenes, versus the man's doing a terrible job belittling the woman's like, I don't do whatever I want. You don't tell me what to do. And it's like, well, no, you're not. I'm not what I said. It's what God said. If you want to be in that realm, that shiny light in God's eyes, he's like, I'm giving you my perspective. And I love that because it's not the man's perspective. It's not some patriarchy, weirdo religious stuff where it's, skirts and no makeup and you got to, all this other weird stuff that, we've made up. We now it tells you to be modest. And, we have some definitions of words, but God's like, from my eyeballs, this is what I want to see. So then the man's we actually have an easy role. Go look for that, and that's it. We don't really have to go and try to find out all the extra stuff. He's like, hey, guess what? If you're looking for the braids and the gold and all the other stuff, you're looking in the wrong places. Yep. And it's not so much about the women, it's about the men's eyeballs. Right. Because that's what the men are looking at. Oh, man, she's all pretty. Oh, man, she's got the cool hair. She's got the danglies. Everything's awesome. He's like, see, you're getting him distracted. He's supposed to be looking at the heart, Yep. So it's an interesting, this whole chapter is really interesting.
Yeah.
And then that verse 10 and 11, where it talks about, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. How many times do we read in there talking about the prayer of the righteous availeth much, or the prayers of the righteous are heard by God, the prayers of the righteous aren't turned away. This is just repeating that more. Yeah. Hey, men, when you're in your marriage, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, your prayers are being heard. And then so now this is a quote from where's this quote from? Psalms 34. So it's another quote saying, by the way, your righteousness is very dependent on how much I deal with you and in what level I deal with you. And, we don't want to hear that because we're like, oh, God's all love. He shows up for everybody. He's just going to pour on. It's love, love, love. He's like, kind of. but also I do listen when you're righteous. That's what gets my ears. So, ooh, is that a righteous guy?
Would you say that verses 13 through 18 is pretty much for the wives who have the unbelieving one and how to just hold on and what do possibly?
Not
You're still going to follow what Yeshua says and all that. So when it says, like, should you suffer for the sake of righteousness? Maybe.
it could be. I mean, I think at this point, it's speaking just in general. I don't think it's like trying to pinpoint out to the wife so much. Of course, the application's there for both parties, but I don't think it's a specific digging in or trying to like hone in on something. My opinion. You guys have anybody different opinion?
I think it's just to both parties, but if it applies that, yeah, just keep your faith in the Lord, and on the stuff that he said for us to do in our roles, do that,
Right,
and do that in reverence of Him while
Yeah.
respecting your spouse.
I was gonna say in context, this last part you're talking about going into 13, because in verse 8 it says, to sum up, let all of you be like-minded, sympathetic, loving as brothers, tender-hearted, humble-minded. This is, like it says, let all of you. This is men and women. You know, I know this is written from a masculine point of view or whatever, but this is speaking to everyone. He says, he who wishes to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. That's for everyone, man and woman. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him speak peace and pursue it, because the eyes of Jehovah are on the righteous, and his ears are upon their prayers. But the face of Jehovah is against those who do evil. And it says in 13, going down, it says, and who is the one doing evil to you if you become imitators of the good? But even if you suffer the righteousness' sake, you are blessed, and do not fear their hearts, neither be troubled. But set apart Jehovah Elohim in your hearts, and always be ready to give an answer to everyone asking you a reason concerning the expectation that is in you with meekness and fear. So I think this is there's the man, the woman, man, then it goes, and then for everybody, this is a good general rule to follow.
Yeah, because it talks about, suffering for righteousness, like that's a standard for all humans, is to live in a righteous manner. And then the first Peter 3:15, that's one I've quoted hundreds of times, because I think it's important that we walk in the world as men and women, husbands, wives, individuals, single, whatever, that we are prepared to make a defense for our faith, that we are able to share with somebody why we believe what we believe and why we're in the situation we're in. How easy is it in our world today? It's like, oh, he did wrong, oh, she did wrong, yeah, just divorce, just move on. Like, no, it's like, no, be prepared to make a defense of why you're doing this. You're doing it for righteousness' sake. As the woman that says you do this so you can win him over. It's like, why are you doing this? Oh, because the Bible told me to, and I live by that book and that standard. And I think that even falls into like our salvation walk is why are you doing that? Because we're supposed to be, like Joe said many times, that someone's always watching. If we're supposed to live in a world where people are looking to us to see, why are you special? Why are you set apart? Why are you acting different? Well, we have an answer. We should be prepared to give that answer. It's not like, I don't know, I just do what he says, and I don't know, I guess that's good enough. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I can say, living in a household like this kind of goes with at least my experience, because if we're supposed to have our actions show instead of words, I've gone through this slander a whole bunch, and I still got to go and act that way, like the way it goes back and reflects on him. So I see it as like, hey, you're in this, you're getting attacked by that person they don't believe, but you're still showing actions anyway, and you suffer through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's why it goes through. I know you were going to talk about in 18, for Christ also suffered. It's like, it's taking you on these like little mini, it's like, you think your little problem, your little marriage, your little situation, come on, let's expand this out a little bit. What did Jesus do? He was literally perfect. You're not perfect, so you deserve a little bit of. I'm not saying deserve, but yeah, exactly. He's like, Jesus went to the end and back. Got beaten to the worst punishment possible, crucifixion, all the other stuff, and for no reason. Like at least if we all die, we're like, we did something wrong. We probably deserved it. He's like, I didn't deserve this at all, and I still willingly accepted it. So in that scenario, whenever we replace the Jonathan, the whoever with Christ, you're like, oh, I could suffer forever. There's no end to what I'm willing to give to do what's righteous.
When you feel like you've been beaten down, put your eyes on the thing and really see He's suffering.
Right. Yeah, and then it just changes the
He
standard. Exactly. It's a perspective thing where it helps you to say my problems are small in comparison to what he went through. And then that's why at the very end it tells you that he's gone already into heaven and he's sitting at the right hand with the angels and the authorities. So he's like, hey, what he did got him there. Imagine what you can do and where it gets you. You know what I mean? It's like truly telling you your eyes should be focused on the end game, but you live each day at a time. You know, because it tells you don't worry about tomorrow. Let tomorrow worry about itself. So it's like a weird concept of let tomorrow be there, but what you do today affects what happens tomorrow. But if you're just so worried about tomorrow, then what you're doing today is going to be in a lesser effect. And so it's a weird paradox. You're like, I need to make sure today's good, so tomorrow's good, but don't worry about tomorrow because I got to make sure today's good. And then he's like, now down the road, where Christ is at, that's our ultimate aim, is to be there with the authorities and the angels and Christ and God and all this cool stuff in the New Jerusalem. And again, this whole chapter is based on what? Righteousness. You know, be righteous like Sarah, be righteous like Abraham, be righteous like this man, be righteous like that guy, be righteous like Jesus. And you're like, oh man, that standard's too high. But just keep on going, keep on pursuing. I don't want to. Or even Noah, it was like, hey, out of all the stuff, all the people, only 8. You know, that I love that he was like, and by the way, I'm gonna give you a quick example of what it means to be righteous. You might be 8 out of 7 billion. There might be 8 of you. Just be prepared to know you might be the only 8 people in the whole world doing the right thing. And you still have to do the right thing. Don't let the world's pressures come to you, because God will rescue you out of that scenario.
I'm gonna give a little personal introspective about this. So my wife's dad, Jesse's parents got divorced when she was 8 years old, and her dad went off and did some pretty debaucherous things towards the family and stuff like that. And Jesse's mom could have held bitterness in her heart and she did for a long time, because it was like after 18 years of marriage, he decided that they were going to go their separate ways. My wife and her mother have prayed for that man since that time. And I have told Jesse numerous times, I don't know why you're chasing a relationship with him. He's made it very clear that he is not interested in any sort of relationship. And it wasn't like he was mean about it. It wasn't like he was, kind of a jerk about it. It was just, he was just not there, and he wouldn't answer her calls and stuff like that. Well, last year, he and his high school sweetheart, after him having to walk out a lot of consequences of his decisions that he made, that I'm not going to get into because it's not my business to put out there. After a lot of him walking out consequences, he and his high school girlfriend just happened to meet up again for their 50th anniversary of their school, of high school, their high school 50th anniversary or something like that. And they are now married, and he is back in church. And that man is back in church because of 2 things: God and a bunch of women who were praying for that man. So never give up, because I told you, I was very curt about it. And as the husband, I should have been encouraging Jesse, pray about it. And I did, after she put me in my place where she didn't do it meanly. She's just like, no, he's my father. I respect him, and I'm going to pray for him. And I'm like, yeah, that's the biblical correct answer. So after, 30 years of this, he's now back in church, and they're married. And now it didn't work out for him and Jesse's mom, but Yah brought him back to his fold.
Right.
So it's just stay the course, because you never know how long. Because again, like we talked about last week, people have to walk out the consequences of their actions. God's not just going to supersede, like, okay, so you did this, this was wrong. I'm just going to, like, he can forgive you, but at the same time, he can only forgive you for so much. You have to walk out the consequences to your actions. So her dad had to walk out 30 years of consequences before Yah brought him back. And it was not a good time for him. I can tell you that right now.
That's an awesome story, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
Got any closing remarks, ladies and folk?
Hey, ladies.
All right. So the one thing I want to leave off with is I really just wanted to read 18, so I'm going to do that anyway. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteousness for this unrighteousness, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but being made alive in the spirit. That's a verse that I feel we should focus on way more than we do currently. Is live according to the spirit, not according to the flesh. And that was Christ's ultimate aim and goal whenever he could even achieve the priesthood, is whenever he was made alive in the spirit.
Mhm.
While he was in the flesh, he could not be a high priest.
Right.
When he was in the spirit, he could be. And our ultimate aim and ultimate goal is to receive that spirit body, that perfect body that's immortal, that we can live forever in the kingdom with him and his son. And that does involve, quote unquote, crucifying the flesh. That does involve, not living according to what the earthly desires are. We want to eat, we want to pleasure, we want to whatever. You guys, like, sometimes you have to let that side of your desires go, and you have to say, what does the Bible tell me to do? Does the Bible tell me to act the way I'm acting, do the things I'm doing, raise my voice, yell, act out, blah, blah, blah? And this, both sides of the equation, no, right? It says live righteously, live peaceably, live well. Joe read it earlier. Unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, humble mind, and don't do the evil for evil stuff. He's like, hey, if someone's acting crazy, just keep doing what you're supposed to do. Keep focusing on God, and let the rest, all these other things be added to you, because those are the things of the spirit, not of the flesh.
Amen. That being said, guys, we're going to call it for today. And thank you so much for joining us on the Shabbat. We're going to I'm attempting to have an earlier service today. We're having a celebration here out at the property, and just having people come over and cooking out and all that stuff later. And so anyway, so service will hopefully be at about 4:30. So it'll be about 30 minutes earlier than normal, but I hope for all of you can join us for then. I'm going to be speaking about the sons of Zadok. We're going to be speaking about authority. And it's funny, not funny, but funny that God put this on my heart to teach about this today. And I totally forgot this was going to be the lesson on Korah today. And so I think it's going to go hand in hand with that teaching. If you can join us at 4:30, awesome. If not, catch it later. But Jonathan, go ahead and close us out, brother. We'll go from there.
All right. Joe, thank you for the study. Thank you for all the words in the scripture, the ones that are in this book and the ones that didn't make it to the book. I thank you for your willingness to listen to our hearts and to give us wisdom when we seek it, Lord. I know that there's so many things in this book that go counterculture and counter what makes sense in on the world's perspective according to the flesh, but ultimately your ways and your righteousness is what we're to pursue and to act out. Help us to not be in the camps of Korah or in the camps of a bad example of being men and women, wives and husbands. So I just thank you so much that you honor us, and when we honor you, and we live a life to try to bless your name, that we try to show the world who you are and who you are in us, that we are prepared to make a defense for our faith, that the world may know that we belong to you. One way that the world can know that is for our love for one another. So I just pray that we continue to show love, that we continue to give and provide. We take care of those less fortunate, and that we remember that this Sabbath day was set apart from page 1 of the Bible, and you are always ready and prepared to meet us each and every week, and that we continue to do so until you call us home or until you come back. I praise your son's holy name, Yeshua. Amen.
Amen. Shalom, everybody. God bless you, and we'll see some of you here in just a little bit.
Great.